The Zephyrian queen's crystalline form trembled as the scanner's harsh light swept across the two human females chained before her throne. The readings made no sense. Both carried life within them, the mother's belly rounded with obvious pregnancy, her daughter barely showing, but the biosignatures pulsing on the queen's neural interface told an impossible story. Captain Marcus Chen stood 15 feet behind the captives, his hands bound with energy restraints, watching helplessly as Queen Veltara's insectoid features shifted through expressions of confusion, then growing alarm. The royal guards flanked her throne, their plasma weapons humming with deadly potential. "Explain this anomaly," the queen's voice resonated through the chamber's bioacoustic walls, each word carrying the weight of absolute authority. Her forearms gestured at the holographic display showing the scan results. "These humans registered genetic markers identical to our royal bloodline. Impossible." Sarah Martinez, 43, kept her protective arm around her 19-year-old daughter Elena despite the chains binding their wrists. Both women bore the exhaustion of 3 days in Zephyrian captivity, their clothes torn from the violent abduction that had claimed their lives on Earth's outer colonies. Marcus stepped forward despite his restraints. "Your Majesty, I can't explain." A royal guard's plasma rifle swung toward his chest, the weapon's charging whine cutting off his words. Queen Veltara raised one clawed hand, staying the guard's trigger finger. "The human males may speak. But choose words carefully, Captain Shen. My patience grows thin with this mystery." Elena's grip tightened on her mother's arm. The bioscanner's relentless sweep had revealed something she'd kept hidden for weeks, something that would change everything if discovered. Sarah felt her daughter's fear and squeezed back, maternal instinct overriding her own terror. Marcus's throat constricted as he processed the Queen's earlier words. Genetic markers, royal bloodline. The implications crashed through his military-trained mind like shockwaves. 3 years ago, during his first contact mission to Zephyr Prime, he participated in what the aliens called a cultural exchange. What he'd thought was diplomacy had been something far more significant. "The genetic markers," Marcus began carefully, "they're accurate, Your Majesty. 3 years ago, during the peace negotiations, I was selected for a ceremonial bonding with one of your people." Queen Veltara's compound eyes glittered with sudden interest. Her bioluminescent pattern shifted from alarm purple to curiosity gold. "Continue." "Princess Zalvira chose me for what she called a life thread ceremony. I was told it was an honor, a symbolic gesture of alliance between our species. She explained that our union would create a bridge between Zephyrian and human consciousness." The Queen's forearms stilled completely. The name of her daughter hung in the air like a death sentence. Princess Zalvira had been lost 6 months ago during a scientific expedition to the Void Nebula, her ship destroyed by quantum storms. The royal family had mourned her death as the end of their genetic line. "Princess Zalvira is dead," the Queen whispered, her voice carrying harmonics of grief that made the chamber's walls vibrate sympathetically. Marcus nodded grimly. "Yes, Your Majesty. But before her death, she told me something. She said the life thread ceremony didn't just create symbolic bonds. It created actual genetic bridges. Any children born from our union would carry both human and Zephyrian markers." Sarah's breath caught. Elena's face went white as understanding crashed over her. The timing, Marcus's deployment schedules, the strange dreams Elena had been having since her pregnancy began, everything aligned with devastating clarity. Queen Veltara rose from her throne, her 8-foot frame casting dancing shadows across the captives. The bioscanner's readings now made terrible sense. Both human females carried children with royal Zephyrian genetics, but only one child could be Marcus's direct offspring. The older female's pregnancy shows standard human development with Zephyrian markers, the Queen stated, reading the data with growing comprehension. But the younger female, her voice trailed off as the implications became clear. Elena's voice came out as barely a whisper. "I'm Marcus's daughter." The royal guards shifted position, plasma weapons now trained on all 3 humans. Zephyrian law was absolute. Royal bloodlines could only be perpetuated through controlled breeding programs. Unauthorized genetic mixing was punishable by immediate execution. But Queen Velthara's compound eyes were locked on Elena's barely visible pregnancy. If Princess Alvira's genetic legacy lived on through Marcus, and if that legacy had somehow been passed to his daughter, then the child growing in Elena's womb represented something unprecedented in Zephyrian history. 2 generations, the Queen breathed, her bioluminescence shifting to colors Marcus had never seen before. A grandmother, mother, and unborn grandchild all carrying my daughter's genetic code? Sarah finally found her voice. "What does that mean for us?" Queen Valthara's gaze moved between the three humans, her expression cycling through emotions that human eyes could barely interpret. The scanner continued its relentless sweep, confirming what they all now understood. The royal bloodline hadn't ended with Princess Zalvira's death. It had evolved, spread across species barriers in ways that challenged every law and tradition of Zephyrian civilization. The Queen's next words would determine whether the humans lived or died. Queen Valtara descended from her throne with fluid grace, each step echoing through the biochamber like a death knell. Her royal guards maintained their weapons' focus on the three humans, but Marcus noticed subtle changes in their posture. The plasma rifles remained steady, but several guards exchanged glances that suggested uncertainty rather than absolute conviction. In 7,000 years of Zephyrian civilization, the Queen began, her voice carrying harmonics that made the chamber walls pulse with soft light, no royal bloodline has ever crossed species barriers. Our genetic structure was designed to remain pure, unchanged, eternal. She paused before Elena, studying the young woman's face with the intensity of a scientist examining a rare specimen. Elena forced herself to meet the alien queen's compound gaze, her mother's hand providing the only anchor to courage she possessed. Yet Princess Zalvira chose to experiment. My daughter always pushed boundaries, questioned traditions our people held sacred for millennia. The queen's bioluminescence shifted to deep purple, the Zephyrian color of profound grief mixed with reluctant pride. Tell me, Captain Chen, what did my daughter say about the consequences of your union? Marcus struggled against his energy restraints, desperate to step closer to his daughter and Sarah. She spoke of evolution, Your Majesty. Princess Zalvira believed that genetic isolation would eventually destroy both our species. She said the life thread ceremony would create something new, something that could survive challenges neither humans nor Zephyrians could face alone. Prophetic words, the Queen murmured, then turned to Sarah. You carry Marcus's child, yet you are not bound to him by human matrimonial customs. Explain this relationship. Sarah's jaw tightened. 3 days of captivity had stripped away her diplomatic training, leaving only maternal fury and protective instinct. Marcus is Elena's father. I'm carrying his child. Our family structure isn't your concern, Your Majesty. The boldness of Sarah's words sent ripples of shock through the royal guards. Several plasma weapons hummed with increased charge, their operators awaiting the Queen's permission to fire. But Queen Veltara's response surprised everyone. Her bioluminescence shifted to golden green, amusement mixed with respect. You defend your young as Zephyrian mothers do, the Queen observed, with absolute ferocity, regardless of personal cost. This trait is admirable. Elena felt her unborn child stir within her womb, a sensation that had been growing stronger since their capture. The movement felt different from normal fetal activity, more purposeful, more aware. She'd been hiding this strangeness from everyone, including her mother, but the bioscanner's relentless probing made concealment impossible. The scans show unusual neural development in both pregnancies, the Queen continued, studying the holographic displays that updated in real time. The children appear to be developing hybrid consciousness patterns, part human emotional complexity, part Zephyrian quantum awareness. If these pregnancies reach full term, the offspring will possess capabilities neither species has ever recorded. Marcus finally understood the true scope of Princess Zalvira's experiment. She hadn't just created genetic bridges, she'd engineered a new form of consciousness that could think in ways impossible for either parent species. What does this mean for our future? He asked, trying to keep desperation from his voice. Queen Velthara moved to the chamber's central viewing portal, gazing out at the vast Zephyrian fleet that surrounded their flagship. Thousands of bioships stretched across the starfield, each one carrying millions of Zephyrian citizens fleeing their dying homeworld. Our sun expires in 2 generations, she said without turning around. Zephyrian quantum biology requires specific stellar radiation to survive. We've searched for decades, found nothing. Every planet we've surveyed lacks the precise electromagnetic frequencies our people need to live. She turned back to face the humans, her expression grave. But hybrid consciousness might adapt where pure Zephyrian minds cannot. If your children can think in both human and Zephyrian patterns, they might solve problems that have condemned my entire species to extinction. Sarah's protective instincts flared. You want to use our children as experimental subjects? I want to offer them a choice their parents never had, the Queen corrected. The choice to save 2 civilizations instead of watching both species die separately. Elena spoke for the first time since her revelation, her voice steady despite her youth. What would happen to us? To our families? That depends, Queen Veltara replied. on how much you trust each other, and how willing you are to challenge every assumption about what family means. The royal guards shifted position again, but this time their movement suggested preparation for a lengthy discussion rather than immediate execution. Marcus realized they'd reached a crossroads that would determine not just their survival, but the future of two species. Elena felt her unborn child move again, and this time the sensation carried something impossible. A sense of understanding, as if the developing consciousness could somehow perceive the monumental decision hanging in the balance. The Queen waited for their response, her alien features set in an expression that somehow conveyed both desperate hope and absolute determination. Whatever came next would either forge an unprecedented alliance or doom them all to extinction. "Before we continue," Queen Veltara said, her voice taking on formal ceremonial tones, "you must understand the full truth of Princess Zalvira's experiment." She gestured to her royal guards, who immediately moved to escort the humans to the chamber's central platform. The energy restraints dissolved, but Marcus knew better than to mistake this for freedom. They were surrounded by beings who could kill them with a thought. The Queen activated a holographic display that filled the air with swirling genetic models, neural pathway diagrams, and stellar charts showing the Zephyrian fleet's desperate journey across the galaxy. Princess Zalvira didn't choose Captain Chen randomly for the life thread ceremony, she began. She studied human genetic patterns for months, searching for specific traits that might complement Zephyrian quantum consciousness. Military discipline, protective instincts, adaptability under extreme stress, all qualities essential for hybrid survival. Marcus stared at his own genetic profile floating in the hologram, annotated with notes in Zephyrian script that painted his entire military career as an extended audition for an experiment he'd never known he was part of. "She seduced me," he said quietly. "Everything we shared was calculated." "No." The Queen's bioluminescence flashed with surprising intensity. "My daughter's emotional attachments were genuine. Zalvira could have used artificial insemination or genetic manipulation to create hybrid offspring. Instead, she chose to form genuine bonds because she believed love would strengthen the genetic bridges she was building." Sarah stepped closer to the holographic display, her scientific background allowing her to interpret some of the genetic models. "The neural development patterns in our children, they're not random mutations. Someone designed these changes. Princess Zalvira embedded quantum consciousness seeds within the life thread ceremony," the Queen confirmed. "Any offspring from Marcus would carry the potential for hybrid awareness. When Elena became pregnant, those dormant seeds activated, passing enhanced capabilities to the next generation." Elena's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. "Enhanced how? What's happening to my baby?" "Your child is developing the ability to process information in multiple dimensional layers simultaneously," the Queen explained. "Human emotional intelligence combined with Zephyrian quantum perception. The first consciousness capable of solving problems that exist across species. Barriers." The implications crashed through Marcus's mind like artillery strikes. Elena's pregnancy wasn't just carrying his grandchild. It was gestating humanity's first glimpse of a fundamentally new form of awareness. "But Sarah's pregnancy is different," he realized, studying the holographic comparisons. "Her child shows hybrid markers, but the neural development patterns are more stable." Queen Velthara nodded approvingly. "Sarah's child will serve as an anchor. Hybrid consciousness requires enormous mental energy. Without emotional stability, such awareness could drive an individual to madness. Sarah's offspring will provide the psychological foundation that allows Elena's child to safely utilize enhanced capabilities." Sarah felt her unborn baby move, and for the first time since their capture, she wondered if her child could somehow sense the momentous conversation happening around it. "You're describing a breeding program," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "You want to use our children to create some kind of hybrid race?" "I'm describing survival," the Queen replied bluntly. "In 18 months, Zephyrian civilization will face complete extinction. Your children represent the only hope for preserving what we are while adapting to what we must become." Elena stepped forward, surprising everyone with her sudden boldness. "What about choice? What if our children don't want to be bridges between species? What if they just want normal lives?" The Queen's compound eyes fixed on Elena with an intensity that made the young woman's breath catch. "Look around you, child. Normal lives ended the moment Princess Zalvira chose your father for the life thread ceremony. Your children will face choices no human or Zephyrian has ever confronted. The question isn't whether they'll be different. It's whether they'll have the support they need to handle that difference constructively." Marcus felt the weight of generations pressing down on him. Every decision he'd made, every relationship he'd formed, had led to this moment. His daughter carried a child that might represent the future of consciousness itself. "If we agree to work with you," he said carefully, "what guarantees do we have? How do we know you won't treat our children as experimental subjects?" "Because," Queen Veltara replied, her bioluminescence shifting to colors that conveyed deep respect, "they won't be subjects. If Princess Zalvira's theories prove correct, your children will be our teachers." The royal guards surrounding them remained alert but no longer hostile. Marcus realized they'd crossed some invisible threshold, from captives to potential allies in a struggle that transcended species boundaries. Elena felt her unborn child respond to her elevated heart rate, movements that seemed almost like communication. She was carrying humanity's first step into an uncertain future, and the weight of that responsibility was both terrifying and exhilarating. The Queen waited for their decision, her alien features betraying nothing of the desperate hope that drove her people's survival instincts. The next words spoken would either forge an alliance between species or condemn both civilizations to eventual extinction. Queen Velthara moved to a control interface that emerged from the chamber's bioorganic walls, her 4 arms dancing across panels that responded to her touch with pulsing bioluminescence. The holographic display shifted, showing real-time medical scans of both pregnancies with detail that made human technology seem primitive by comparison. "Before you make your decision," she said, "you must understand what's already happening to your children." The scans revealed neural activity patterns that defied human medical understanding. Elena's fetus showed brain development accelerated far beyond normal human gestational timelines, while Sarah's child displayed unusual connectivity between emotional and logical processing centers. "They're communicating," Sarah breathed, staring at synchronized brainwave patterns between the 2 pregnancies. "Across our bodies. That's impossible." "Not impossible," the Queen corrected. "Previously unknown. Hybrid consciousness operates through quantum entanglement principles. Your children are developing shared awareness even before birth." Marcus stepped closer to the display, his military mind cataloging implications. Shared awareness means shared vulnerabilities. If something happens to one child, the other could be affected, Queen Veltara confirmed. "This is why separation isn't an option. Your children need each other for psychological stability and proper development. They're designing themselves as complementary halves of a single enhanced consciousness." Elena felt her baby's movements intensify, as if responding to the revelation about its connection to its future sibling. The sensation carried unexpected emotional weight, not just physical awareness, but something approaching recognition. "How long have you known about this connection?" Sarah demanded. "Since our scanners first detected the pregnancies 3 days ago," the Queen admitted. "The quantum entanglement signatures were immediately apparent. What surprised us was the sophistication of the connection. These children aren't just sharing information, they're collaborating on their own development." The royal guards shifted position, forming a protective circle around the platform. Marcus realized this wasn't about preventing escape. They were establishing a secure perimeter around what the Zephyrians clearly considered invaluable assets. Princess Zalvira's experimental protocols included detailed predictions about hybrid development, the Queen continued. According to her research, the children will reach cognitive milestones months ahead of normal schedules. They'll begin demonstrating enhanced capabilities within weeks of birth. "Enhanced how?" Elena asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. "Pattern recognition that spans dimensional barriers. Emotional processing that can influence quantum states. Problem-solving abilities that combine human intuition with Zephyrian logic matrices." The Queen paused, studying Elena's face. "Your children will think in ways that could reshape both species' understanding of consciousness itself." Sarah's protective instincts flared again. "And if we refuse to cooperate? If we want to raise our children without Zephyrian interference?" Queen Veltara's bioluminescence dimmed to almost darkness, a display of profound sadness that needed no translation. "Then both children will likely die within months of birth. Hybrid consciousness requires specific environmental conditions for proper development. Without Zephyrian quantum field generators and human emotional nurturing, their enhanced neural systems will destabilize." The truth hit Marcus like a physical blow. They weren't being offered a choice. They were being informed about the only path that would keep their children alive. "You're saying our babies need both human love and alien technology to survive?" he said quietly. "I'm saying evolution has chosen your family to take the next step in consciousness development," the Queen replied. Princess Zalvira believed this step was inevitable. The only question was whether it would happen through cooperation or catastrophe. Elena's baby moved again, and this time she could swear the sensation carried emotional content, not fear, but anticipation, as if the developing consciousness somehow understood the magnitude of its own potential. "What would cooperation look like?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Integration, Queen Velthara answered immediately. Your family would become the first human Zephyrian hybrid household. Your children would grow up with access to both cultures, both ways of thinking, both approaches to solving problems. They would become living bridges between our species. And when they're old enough to make their own choices? Sarah pressed. They'll face decisions no one can imagine yet, the Queen said honestly, but they'll face them with capabilities no one has ever possessed. The question is whether they'll have the family support they need to handle such responsibility. The royal guards remained silent, but Marcus noticed their weapons had been completely deactivated. This wasn't a negotiation under threat. It was a desperate plea for partnership from beings whose entire civilization hung in the balance. Elena took her mother's hand, feeling the child within her respond to the physical contact with increased activity. Whatever choice they made would echo across generations of both species. The Queen waited, her compound eyes reflecting light that seemed to carry the hopes of millions of Zephyrian refugees scattered across the starfield beyond the chamber walls. The silence stretched until Elena broke it with words that would change everything. If we agree to this integration, do our children get to choose their own path when they're old enough? Or are they forever bound to serve as bridges between species? Queen Velthara's bioluminescence shifted through several colors before settling on a pattern Marcus had never seen, deep blue mixed with silver, conveying complex emotions that human language couldn't capture. Princess Zelvira anticipated this question, the Queen said. She designed the genetic modifications with built-in safeguards. Your children will possess enhanced capabilities, but they'll also retain complete autonomy over how they use those abilities. They can choose to facilitate interspecies cooperation, or they can choose to live as enhanced humans with Zephyrian traits dormant. Sarah studied the holographic displays showing her unborn child's neural development. But the quantum entanglement between our babies, that can't be undone, can it? No, the Queen admitted. They'll share a connection throughout their lives. However, that connection will strengthen them rather than constrain them. Neither child will be complete without the other, but both will be more than either species has ever produced. Marcus felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. As a military officer, he understood strategic necessity. As a father, he wanted nothing but safety for his children. The two imperatives seemed impossible to reconcile. What about practical considerations? He asked. Where would we live? How would the children be educated? What happens when they start demonstrating abilities that other humans might fear? The Zephyrian fleet includes bioships specifically designed for interspecies cooperation, Queen Velthara explained. Princess Zalvira commissioned their construction before her death. Your family would have a home that adapts to both human comfort requirements and Zephyrian quantum field needs. She gestured, and new holographs appeared showing ship interiors that seemed to blend organic architecture with familiar human living spaces. Rooms that could reshape themselves for different activities, environmental systems that responded to occupant needs, educational facilities equipped with both human and Zephyrian learning technologies. The ships are designed to travel between human and Zephyrian territories, the Queen continued. Your children would grow up experiencing both civilizations, learning to navigate both cultures. When they reach maturity, they'll understand their heritage from personal experience, not just genetic programming. Elena felt her baby's movements intensify as the Queen spoke about their potential future. The child seemed to respond to concepts of growth, learning, and exploration with something approaching excitement. How many other hybrid children are there? Sarah asked suddenly. Are our babies the only ones? The Queen's bioluminescence dimmed significantly. Princess Elvira conducted 3 life thread ceremonies with different human partners. Captain Chen was the only one whose genetic combination produced viable hybrid offspring. The other experiments failed. The weight of uniqueness settled over the families. Elena and Sarah's children weren't just the first of their kind. They might be the only ones. Failed how? Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Genetic incompatibility led to pregnancy termination in both cases. The hybrid consciousness seeds couldn't establish stable connections with human neural development patterns. The Queen's voice carried harmonics of grief for experiments that had cost lives across species boundaries. Your family represents the successful culmination of years of careful research and considerable sacrifice. Elena placed her hand on her stomach, feeling her child respond to her touch. The baby's movements seemed to carry awareness of the conversation happening around it, as if the developing consciousness could somehow understand the magnitude of its own existence. If we agree to this partnership, she said slowly, what happens to normal human Zephyrian relations? Do our children become symbols, diplomatic tools, political pawns? They become hope, Queen Velthara replied simply. For the first time since our species discovered each other, we have proof that cooperation is possible at the most fundamental biological level. Your children will demonstrate that differences between species can become strengths rather than barriers. The royal guards had remained motionless throughout the discussion, but Marcus noticed subtle changes in their posture that suggested deep respect rather than mere duty. These beings weren't just following orders, they were witnessing what they believed might be the salvation of their entire civilization. Sarah looked at her daughter, seeing in Elena's young face the same determination that had carried their family through countless challenges. Elena, this has to be your choice as much as mine. You're carrying the child who will face the greatest challenges. Elena was quiet for a long moment, her hands still resting on her stomach. When she spoke, her voice carried a maturity that surprised everyone. I think the choice was made for us when Princess Zalvira first approached Dad. Everything since then has been preparation for this moment. The question isn't whether we should accept this responsibility, it's whether we're brave enough to help our children carry it. Queen Velthara's compound eyes glittered with something that might have been tears if Zephyrians possessed tear ducts. Princess Zalvira would be proud of your courage. Both of you embody the qualities she believed essential for successful hybrid consciousness development. Marcus stepped forward, his decision crystallizing. If we do this, we need guarantees. Our children's safety, their freedom to choose their own paths, protection from being exploited by either species. We're talking about their entire lives. Agreed, the Queen said immediately. Princess Zalvira included specific protocols in her research notes. Your children will be protected by laws that transcend both human and Zephyrian jurisdictions. They'll have rights that neither species alone could provide. The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of bioorganic systems that maintained the ship's life support. 3 generations of humanity stood at the threshold of an evolutionary leap that would reshape the future of consciousness itself. Elena felt her child move one final time, and in that moment she knew with absolute certainty that her unborn baby was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. We accept, she said quietly, her words carrying the weight of destiny across species and time. Queen Veltara's bioluminescence exploded into colors of joy and gratitude that bathed the entire chamber in warm, welcoming light. The royal guards lowered their weapons completely, their formal postures relaxing into something approaching celebration. Then let us begin, the Queen said, preparing for the future your children will create. The decision made, Sarah felt her own unborn child respond with movements that seemed to echo Elena's baby's activity. Already the siblings were beginning their synchronized dance through development, consciousness, and destiny. Marcus watched his daughter place her hand over her mother's pregnant belly, connecting 3 generations in a moment that would be remembered as the day 2 species chose evolution over extinction. The stars beyond the chamber's viewing portal seemed to shine brighter, as if the universe itself approved of the choice that would carry consciousness into unprecedented territory. Queen Velthara activated communication channels that connected to every ship in the Zephyrian fleet, her voice carrying news that would transform both civilizations forever. The future had begun.